Joining us now is Tom Hamburger. He's a reporter for The Washington Post, along with his colleague Rosalind Helderman. He wrote this major news story for the Post today. It's titled, How a McConnell-Backed Effort to Lift Russian Sanctions Boosted a Kentucky Project. Mr. Hamburger, thank you so much for being with us tonight. Really appreciate you making the time.
Thanks. Good to be with you.
So I can't help but see your story in the political context in which it's breaking. The story is breaking at a time when Senator McConnell is already really chafing at Democrats teasing him with this nickname, Moscow Mitch. They have been accusing him of essentially, effectively helping the Russian government in a number of his actions. Because of how pointed this reporting is and how many questions it raises about his actions, I have to ask about what his reaction has been and what he told you and his office told you in response to this reporting.
Rachel, the phrase that you used a moment ago, Mitch McConnell chafing, is an understatement. He is absolutely furious, livid at the nickname that he's earned, Moscow Mitch, and the suggestions that he is compliant with Vladimir Putin. He described him on the Senate floor before the recess, Putin as a thug, and said his career is replete with his examples of his taking on Russia and taking on the Kremlin. So chafing, to say the least, at suggestions that he does not have a strong record in combating Putin and the Kremlin. On the other hand, there are these examples, which you cited a moment ago, that Democrats and other political foes in Kentucky are listing to cite ways in which it does seem that he voted or pursued legislation in a way that was helpful to the Kremlin. He resists it strongly and, by the way, insists that before the sanctions vote that we talked about in January, he had no knowledge that there was a potential Russian investment in his home state.
And that denial is interesting. I mean, I think there has to be further reporting, I guess, to sort of test the credibility of that claim. As far as I can tell, the company that is partnering with this Russian aluminum company to build the firm, they also say that they were not talking to Mitch McConnell about that. They're saying they don't think there was any link between the sanctions vote and the decision to build this. But, I mean, on the other hand, you line up the timeline here. And in fact, the former U.S. ambassador to Russia tells you for your piece that this at least appears to have been a blatantly transactional thing. McConnell arranged for these sanctions to be lifted, in effect, and then his state got a $200 million investment. Is it rubbing people the wrong way in Kentucky? Are there concerns about this in his home state?
Well, Rachel, you can see in Kentucky, as in Washington, a sort of strange bipartisan agreement around both sides of this question. We did quote in our story State Legislator Katie Flood, who was outspoken in opposition, saying accepting this money from Rusal taints Kentucky. It means that Kentucky is associated with Rusal and Oleg Deripaska, for whom she had unkind words. On the other hand, we have seen letters from prominent Democrats in the state who are endorsing this plant and are not pleased with any word, including the word you spoke about that occurred on Friday, that something could go awry in the Russian-based company's financing for this plant. I talked with a former Attorney General in Kentucky, prominent Democrat, Greg Stumbo, who's also a leader in the Kentucky State House. And he was around for decades ago when they brought in Toyota, which was a much smoother foreign investment in the state. And he's worried about this one. But he also says, like so many in Kentucky that we talked to, Democrats and Republicans, I hope this works out. I hope this works. And in part, it's what Kentucky politicians are having to do, Rachel, on the one hand, is to consider the possibly pernicious effect of a Russian investment, and on the other, the impact in an impoverished area of having, as you described it, one of the largest the largest new aluminum plant in 40 years. It will employ hundreds of people in an area that has felt economically bereft, and that really gets us to the nub of the sort of political decision that people have to make. We asked Craig Bouchard, the CEO of this company, how he felt about accepting Russian money, knowing he needed capital. On the other hand, At the time that he was having these discussions, the Mueller report was continuing to investigate. They were looking at Oleg Deripaska's role. They were looking at Russians' malign influence in the U.S. 2016 election. And his response was, you can't be picky. Meaning, when it comes to revitalizing a distressed area of our home state, of our country, if we get financing from a company that is offering to put people back to work who are on their heels, we welcome it. And it's going to be what he called, and what the governor of Kentucky calls, one of the greatest moves in the economic development of Kentucky in the entire history of the state.
It's amazing to kind of spin the telescope around both directions. You'll look at it from the Kentucky perspective and look at it from the Russian strategic perspective at the same time, and see how, with a smart move, you can line them up. It's fascinating reporting. Tom Hamburger, reporter for the Washington Post. A fascinating story. Please keep us apprised. I know you guys will stay on this story, and I know it will further develop. Really appreciate you being here tonight.
Thank you.
All right. Big night around here. Senator Cory Booker is going to be joining us here live next. Stay with us.
Hey there, I'm Chris Hayes from MSNBC. Thanks for watching MSNBC on YouTube. If you want to keep up to date with the videos we're putting out, you can click subscribe just below me, or click over on this list to see lots of other great videos.